The arrival and expansion of the Aryans from 1500 BC to the later times was a gradual process. So these Aryans came from the northwestern side through the mountain passes, and gradually they were concentrated. It is said that in the early Vedic period, in the Rig Vedas, we have more reference of places of northwest. So we have reference of region around Kabul. We have a reference of a river known as Saraswati. We have reference of mountain peaks, more reference of mountain peaks. Hindu Kush mountains, and also the Himalayas. There is no reference of rivers of central India, such as the river Riva, which was later identified as Narmada. There is no reference of the knowledge of sea. That means they did not move down to central India. So there is no reference of sea, Samudra. India, which is known as Jambu Deep in many of the ancient texts. Jambu Deep is because there is a fruit known as jambu which looks like the peninsular India. So there is no reference of Jambu Deep. So it was deduced, inferred that in the earlier times, they used to reside in this region, in the northwest region comprising of Punjab, Kabul, Kandahar region. And they were also on the lookout in the search of new natural resources. Later on, with more awareness of the surroundings and also with the advent of agriculture. So one of the most important agency of change, which we will be discussing in detail, what really was the most important factor for the change in society, for the change in polity, that was the beginning of agriculture. So the beginning of agriculture in later Vedic times, in the later Vedic age, it created changes in all fields, in all sphere. The knowledge of agriculture was already there in India, and by now agricultural communities were found in parts of North India, in parts of Northwest, and also in Central India. We have seen that even after the decline of IVC, rural agricultural communities were residing in these parts. And gradually, it is highly possible that on the basis of knowledge exchange, on the basis of interaction with these people, they would have learned the knowledge, the idea of plant domestication. And it is no surprise that the earlier plants were also barley and wheat, which was grown by the people of the later Vedic period. So in the later Vedic period, we see that now they have settled in the Gangetic plains. They have settled in the Gangetic plains and they are moving towards parts of East India. So in the later Vedic period, we see there is more reference of river Ganga, lesser reference of river Saraswati, lesser reference. We have more reference of river Riva identified with Narmada. We have more reference of Himalayas and very less reference of Hindu Kush mountains. There is a reference to Samudra, that is ocean, and a Jambu Deep, which is the land between two oceans. So most probably they were also aware of the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea branch of Indian Ocean. There was Also reference of soma. There was reference of soma juice which was extracted from the herbs in the higher ranges of Himalayas. So we find that gradually over a period of time, their geographical horizon also expanded as they moved further inwards and eastwards in the Indian subcontinent. And we will see that by 600 BC, Magad region emerged as the foothold of the power center. It was the power center by 600 BC. And why this we will see in our later section. That by 600 BC, most of the prominent tribal chiefs who concentrated all the powers moved towards East India and they were going to settle in Magad. Magad and the nearby region which was going to be the power hub of India for the coming centuries. It was going to be the headquarters of the Magad dynasty, of the Mauryas, and also of the Guptas of later times. So Magad, this Magad region which was blessed with a number of advantages, natural resources, rivers, forests, fertile plain, mineralized basin, which was going to be the center focus point of Indian politics for the next 3-4 centuries. Let us understand one by one the changing nature of religion, society, economy, and polity, the changing nature of these four aspects from early Vedic to later Vedic times. And when we are approaching the end of later Vedic times, we will also try to correlate how it moved in the later times. We will try to correlate how it affected and how it was affected in the later times when we see full-fledged second urbanization. We are talking about 600 BC and later times. So we will start with early Vedic times, early Vedic age, and understand, analyze each of the dimensions one by one. Let us start with religion. Vedic religion. What is religion? Why do we need religion? Religion is something like an organized belief system which is revealed through rituals, a number of rituals, fasts, worshipping, idol worship, sacrifices, fasts, pilgrimage. It is focused around one deity or multiple deity. So all these rituals are dedicated to please or to win the favor of a deity. I'm giving a common definition. The deity can be one, the deity can be multiple, like in Hinduism. We have 83 lakh gods and goddesses. So the deity can be one, as there is one Allah, there is one God, there is one Sikh Guru. So Guru is not exactly a god, but he is a messenger. So he can be, deity can be one or many. The deity can have a form, like how we envisage, how we understand Rama, Krishna, different forms of Vishnu, the goddesses, or the god can be, the deity can be formless. The deity does not have to be necessarily a human. Even in the tribal culture, they worship trees, they worship animals. So it can be in any form. But the deity is all powerful. The God is all powerful. So there was no religion per se in a nomadic culture. But with a settled community, they began to understand, they began to think about who created us, what causes life, what causes birth, what causes death, what causes increased productivity, what causes rainfall. So, religion answers many of these questions which could not be answered on the basis of observation. Religion, we see, can be a integrative force. It has been a mobilizing force for mankind because people of common belief system saw their religious identity as one. So religion can be a cohesive force. It can act as the basis for community formation. So there are multiple aspects of religion and religious related issues, how religion affects society, how religion affects economy, politics, which we will not get into. We will focus mainly on Vedic religion. So as we discussed, as we have referred to, that the Vedas, the primary purpose of creating the Vedas was to preserve, to uphold the Vedic religion. So in the Vedas, the core idea is to enable the practice of Vedic religion, the Vedic belief system. This belief system, which had some commonalities with the people in Central Asia. So this Vedic religion, it had some commonalities or common features with Central Asian religion, especially Iranian deities. So we hear of multiple gods in Iranian pantheon and in the Vedic domain which are very similar. For example, we hear of Varuna as the common god in both Iranian belief system and also in the Vedic system. We hear of Vayu, Marut, mountain god. We also hear of Somras, reference of Somras, an elixir. Elixir is a liquid. It is consumed. It is believed that consuming elixir will heal all the disease and will prolong the lifespan. So there is a reference of Soma in Iranian texts also. So we can summarize that when people resided in the Central Asia steppes, they had a common belief system. However, when they came and settled in different parts of the world, if we talk about India, the Aryans who came to India, gradually over a period of time, their gods and goddesses underwent a number of change. And later on, the change was seen with respect to not only the Vedic gods, but also we will see that gradually over a period of time, in Hinduism, more and more of gods are there. So by the time we will be discussing the Gupta age, we will understand. We will understand that how the Vedic deities and the Gupta Hindu deities have commonalities, common origin, common roots, but they are very different. They are very different. So let us begin by saying a simple statement that the Vedic deities, the Vedic gods, most of them were male gods. We have reference of some female goddesses also. So they are the primary deities of Hinduism. Primary deities of the later Hinduism. Let us understand one by one what and who were the gods in early Vedic age. If we talk about the early Vedic period when they had very limited understanding. So these people, they began to observe their surrounding. They began to observe, they began to see the forces of nature. They began to see the forces of nature and then they tried to unravel or have an understanding that what causes rain, what causes lightning, what causes thunder, what causes the flow of river, what is responsible for all this, and they did not find answer to this. So in the early Vedic period, we see that they classified forces of nature. They classified the forces of nature as deities. sun god, the god of thunder, Indra. So we have Surya, sun god. We have Indra, the most important god, the god of thunder and rain. And Indra is also the king of the gods. We have Varuna, the god who was responsible for maintaining order, for maintaining the social order, for maintaining the cosmic order. We have Vayu, the god of wind, and also Agni, the fire god. These people did not believe in afterlife, heaven, and hell. For them, gods or pleasing gods was important for their survival. They did not have any philosophical understanding of heaven, hell, karma, afterlife. They did not have any. They were guided by naive realism. So for them, worshipping of gods was important for immediate benefits. So by naive realism, we mean that they worshipped God. They worshipped the deities for material benefits. They worshipped the god for Putra, son, because in warfare for hunting, a son is required. Pashu, cattle wealth. From the time of arrival of Aryans, we find that cattle wealth, specifically Gau or cow, was a unit of wealth. Putra, Pashu, and also for win in the war. So, war victory. There was no concept of salvation, no understanding of afterlife. They did not get into questions like God created and God is the person who is source of the cosmic order. He is the supreme reality, the relation between Atma and Paramatma. They did not get into all these philosophical questions. For them, they saw everything around, and when they were unable to answer what causes many of these natural forces, many of the natural phenomena, they classified them as God. They classified them as God. So we can also say that the classification of gods on the basis of naturalistic polytheism. Naturalistic means God as forces of nature, and polytheism, when we say polytheism, means we have multiple gods. We have multiple gods. We have referred to Indra, Varuna, Agni, and Marut. Marut is the mountain god. And why Marut? Because Marut, the mountain god, is the source of Somras, the Som, which is an elixir, which is a liquid which provides life, energy, creativity. So the gods were classified as terrestrial, heavenly, waterborne, cowborne. So even there was a god of cow. Now, what is also to note is that Agni or fire was seen as a god. Fire was also seen as an intermediary between people, or let's say a better word, offerer, and the deity. When I say intermediary, for example, you are offering ghee in a fire. You assume that the ghee would be consumed, it would go to the gods. You are offering fruits, you are offering corn, vegetables. So Agni was not only the fire god, but Agni was also an intermediary, or someone who helped to link the deity with the offerer. Agni was a purifier, because of which we see that these Vedic people, these Aryans, Agni was also a purifier, because of which we see Agni as purifier. Because of which we see that they cremated the dead bodies. There was cremation. We have reference that in the initial times they practiced burial also and cremation. But later on, when this concept, when this idea of Agni as a purifier gained currency, it became very popular, then they shifted to cremation. The Vedic religion is known as a religion of rituals. Rituals here we specifically refer to yajna. However, the yajna were very simple. The yajna, most of the rituals could be performed in home. Here, a husband, a married person, husband and wife together participated. There were few community rituals. When I say community rituals means there was participation by the entire community. Here also women participated alongside husbands, alongside their male counterparts, mostly married women and married male. They were responsible for initiating these sacrifices, for initiating these rituals. The community rituals, it was officiated mostly by the tribal chief and attended by the entire community, in which the women alongside their husband participated. We find that these rituals were simplistic because simple offerings were made. Fruits, berries, natural vegetables, all these were offered. So there was not much pressure because the resources were limited. There was not much pressure. And also in the domestic rituals, it could be easily performed on designated days. However, the Vedic people were very much particular about astronomy and also the time period, the time period or the day in which the rituals have to be performed. It is said that the early interest in astronomy of the Aryans was guided by the fact that they believed that on the basis of relative position of celestial objects, certain time period was auspicious. Their interest in astronomy, so rituals were also guided by astronomy. And why astronomy? They believed in observing celestial objects. These celestial objects, based on their relative position, they influenced the auspiciousness. Even today in the Hindu pantheon, it is commonly seen that we go to a Jyotish, an astrologer, to find a auspicious time for a important activity such as marriage, such as the naming of a newly born child, the annaprashan, when the first food grain is offered to a newly born child. So this goes back to the early Vedic times. They also believed in Soma cult. So during the rituals, the somras, the soma was consumed. They believed in cremation. They practiced cremation, and later on, cremation became a popular exercise. However, we also have evidence of burial. In fact, from Gandhara region, we have evidence of early burial. In fact, in a Gandhara grave, we have joint burial. We have the evidence of a joint burial where the dead body of a man and woman is lying together. Some say that it was an evidence of sati, but we do not have any conclusive evidence of the practice of sati, or on a wide scale we do not have any such burials. So maybe that to save space or to reflect family affinity after the death of one of the partners, when the second one died in a later time spot, the person was buried at the same spot. Religion in the later Vedic age. If in the early Vedic age, religion, the belief system, the concept of deities was guided by immediate interest. God was invoked to solve the problems of sun, having more cattle or praying for a victory in the war. Then in the later Vedic age, we saw the emergence of the Holy Trinity, the new deities, the Prajapati, that is Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Lord Shiva, the destructor or the destroyer. So even today we have these holy trinities. So we can say the foundation of this concept of the pantheon of the Trinity was laid in the later Vedic period. In the later Vedic period, with the advent of agriculture, their dependency continued on the forces of nature. But now they, with more food or with surplus agriculture, agricultural food grains, they look towards gods for higher issues. The god or the concept of deity was becoming more and more philosophical, especially with the advent of Upanishads. We see that the earlier gods, Indra, Varun, Marut, Agni, it is not that they disappeared, but they became less important. And in the elaborate rituals, in the yajnas, these gods were invoked. So the early Vedic age, deities, they continued, but they were less important. They were invoked less. And also we see that in terms of rituals, whereas in the early Vedic age the rituals were simple, the community rituals were lesser in number, now with more of resources at their disposal. So in the later Vedic age, with more resources, the rituals became elaborate. The rituals became elaborate and materialistic. And now Agni was only a god. The role of intermediary was taken by a priestly class. So Agni, which was an intermediary which helped a yajman or a performer of a ritual to connect with the deity, which provided for a way in which the offering can reach the gods. Now this position was taken by the priestly class, and the priestly class, one of the 17 class of Brahmanas. So the priestly class, all the Brahmanas are not priests, that we know, but all the Brahmanas used to have the Vedic knowledge. So priestly class was one of the 17 Brahmanas. One of the 17 Brahmanas who were well versed in Vedic knowledge, who could recite hymns in a particular way. Hence their importance was very much. The importance kept increasing. And we see that these rituals were not only associated with religion, but these rituals were also an occasion. The rituals, especially the community rituals, were occasion when the exchange of resources happened at the community level, at the societal level. So they acted as an occasion, as an avenue for exchange and distribution of resources at the community level. Let me explain this in more detail. For example, this is the spot of yajna. This is the ritual performed by a yajman or mostly a kshatriya. So a kshatriya class, the ruling class, used to perform these community rituals, and this was to invoke deities. Here the Brahmana is an intermediary. The Kshatriya used to give to the Brahmana what we know as Dan and Dakshina. And anything could be given as Dan and Dakshina: food grain, precious metals, and sometimes even land. We hear of a very famous epic story that once Lord Vishnu took the incarnate of a Brahman, that is known as Vahaman avatar, and went towards the conclusion of sacrifice of a demon king, Raja Bali. And he asked him to give 3 steps of land, and in the 2 steps he was able to measure the entire cosmos. But Raja Bali offered his head for the 3rd step. So this says that how much the concept of Dan and Dakshina was important in the concept, in the very idea of rituals of the later Vedic age and also the later times. In return for the dan and dakshina, the Brahmana used to provide legitimacy, or used to say that yes, this person is the rightful owner of the community. So in return, the Brahmana used to provide legitimacy to the ruler. The Kshatriya in return for defending the community, in return for leading the community in war against hostile forces, used to demand bali or offering from the producer class. So bali or offering, which though mentioned as voluntary, but it was mandatory. So we see that a transfer of wealth is happening. The producer class, which was later known as the Vaishya, they could not hoard or concentrate wealth. They had to let go of a substantial portion in the form of bali, and we can definitely say that bali, a voluntary offering by the producer class, was more of a tax. And this tax was not kept with the king, but a substantial portion was given to the Brahmanas. So everything is interlinked. We now see that the Kshatriya is dependent upon the Brahmana, the Vaishya is dependent upon the Kshatriya, and overall in this entire equation, the Brahmana emerged as the most beneficial class. And it is so because they claimed themselves as an intermediary between the deity and the Yajman. With more elaborate rituals, with more elaborate community rituals, the role of women in these rituals, it stopped. Now we don't find reference of women participating in these rituals alongside their father or husband. So women's role in the rituals continued now only in the domestic sphere. So we find women only in domestic rituals. There is a lot of emphasis on hymns, and this hymn, these mantras. What is a hymn? Hymn is a mantra. These mantras were recited in Sanskrit, the knowledge of which was on the basis of the oral transmission. So this was given, this was granted, they were trained by their forefathers. So because of their monopoly, Brahmanical monopoly, and because only they were rendered fit to perform these yagyas, the Brahmana as a section became very influential. In the early Vedic age, also we hear of Brahmana. We hear of Brahmana sages, Vashisht, Vishwamitra, who were advisors, who were gurus. But now with the advent of Brahmana as a priestly class, their influence, overall influence in the society increased. We hear of a number of popular community rituals: Ashwamedh Yagya, Rajasuy Yagya, Vajpayee Yagya, or rituals. Ashwamedh, so after a king assumed power, he used to leave a free horse with a message inscribed, and the horse used to roam around in the nearby regions, and nobody could dare to capture the horse, only to invite the king who is performing, who has released the horse, for a war. So it was, in a way, it was a way, it was of increasing the sovereignty, or we can say the influence of the king, So the king could claim that in all the territory where the horse roamed freely, nobody is challenging me, everybody is accepting me as their superior. Rajasuy Yagya was a coronation ceremony. So whenever the old king used to give the throne to either of his son, so a ceremony was performed, Rajasuy Yagya. So this was to seek the blessings of the god. So this was a coronation ritual. Then we have Vajpayee Yagya also. So Vajpayee Yagya was also to increase power. So we see that now the idea of performance of these rituals is not immediate material benefits, but grand territorial benefits or the designs of these tribal chiefs. And these yags, Ashwamedh, Rajasuy and Vajpayee, they were performed by the king, in which Bali or voluntary offering. So it was voluntary only in name. It was a way in which the king, the ruling class, ensured that the Vaishya are not very influential on the basis of their economic prosperity. So a power equation is going on. A new power equation is emerging in which the Kshatriya as partners with the Brahmana are emerging and are going to emerge as the most influential section alongside the Brahmanas. So rituals was a means to acquire legitimacy by the ruling class by seeking the consent of Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas were given Dan and Dakshina. Gradually, a Brahman Kshatriya nexus. Nexus is a type of negative alliance. So, nexus is a type of collaboration between two parties who have come together for getting their vested interests. So, it was a type of alliance which was emerging between Brahmana and Kshatriya. The Brahmana and Kshatriya. And Rig Vedic texts of the later times, Rig Vedic texts, some of the Rig Vedic texts were written in the later Vedic age also. It is mentioned that both should try to develop cooperation with each other. Both should benefit by helping each other. So we also find in the later Vedic age, because by now they have spent considerable time. In the later Vedic age, these Arya people, these Aryans, they have also integrated some of the indigenous people. And when you integrate, when you intermingle with a population, with anyone, for example, if you go to London and you stay for 10, 12 years, then definitely you will acquire, you will imbibe some of the cultural traits of London while also keeping your own root cultural traits intact. The food habits of people, the accent of people in foreign countries getting modified is a common feature. So it was here also when the Aryans came, they were very distinct from the indigenous people who were dark complexioned, who were shorter in height, and they were referred to as dasas and dasyus. Why dasas? Because they were easily enslaved by the Aryans. So, but however, later on, these people were also integrated because for a long time fighting cannot go on. And you need the support, you need the local know-how of these people also. So, what we find? We find that later on, some of the non-Vedic beliefs of dasas, dasyus were also integrated, such as tree worship, such as idea of magical spells. So in the Atharva Veda, we hear reference of nature worship. Nature worship means plants, plant worship, let's say. We have magical spells, charms. So from time immemorial, mankind has had a fascination for shortcut route to solve their problems. They have always believed that magical spells, some sorcery will help them, will give them natural powers, will help them get rid of their immediate problems. So this is something that was mentioned in the Atharva Veda also. Otherwise, in Rig Veda, we don't find any reference of local belief system. Later on, but when too much was happening, so now we see that the rituals were more elaborate. It was a more complex affair. It was a more complex affair in which dan dakshina, there was elaborate preparation being made. So sometimes some within the Kshatriya class, they began to question the very utility of these rituals. So some Kshatriya, they began to question the basic utility of rituals. They began to question. The reaction against excessive materialism emerged. These people, these Kshatriyas, they left the mainstream society. They retired to forests. They retired to forest and they started meditating. They started thinking. They started speculating. What is the purpose of all this tamasha? And on the basis of the speculation, years of thinking, meditation, they came out with philosophical texts known as Upanishads, Aranyakas also. So Upanishads are also known as Vedant. We will be studying Upanishads in detail in our art and culture segment. But Upanishads are the latest, the last addition in the Vedas which speak about the philosophy of rituals. So Upanishads speak about philosophical aspect of rituals. Philosophical aspects of rituals. We also hear of forest texts known as Aranyakas. So Aranyakas, which are forest texts, because they were residing in forests. So this elaborates the life of forest tribals. Also those Kshatriyas, those who were meditating. So we have the life in a forest, away from all the materialism, away from all the glamour and control and regulation. So these books talks about everything. We also see the rise of a movement, I would say, rise of a new way of life that is known as Shamanism. So Shamanas were saints, sages. Shram is a Hindi word. Shram means labor. So Shram means to work hard. So Shamanism, these Shamanic saints, they also did not like too much of materialism, too much of ritualism. So these Shamana saints, they focused on austere life. They focused on simplicity. They focused on meditation instead of rituals. So it is believed that Shamanism was not a new religion. It was a way of life in which certain people were fed up of too much of yagyas, too much of rituals, too much of materialism, and they moved, they retired to forests and they started meditating. They started living a austere life. These are the Shamanas. It is believed that the later heterodox sects, Buddhism and Jainism, has also been considerably influenced by the Shamanic thought. So as I already have told you that the Vedic rituals were also a form of social exchange. So it ensured that the resources are not concentrated in the producer class. The resources are transferred from the producer class to the performer class, that is the Yajman, the Kshatriya, the tribals, in the form of Bali, a voluntary tax, but which was not voluntary. And the Kshatriya also could not concentrate so much of wealth. He also had to let go of this collected tax in the form of Dan and Dakshina. So we can say in one line, in a simple way, that the rituals were also a mechanism deployed, devised by the Brahmanas to ensure that the power of the king is not on the basis of wealth, because there is no permanent army. The power of the king is on the basis of the legitimacy or the go ahead that I provide. So they used to say that yes, you are the chosen one. And because a Brahmana, a learned Brahmana is saying this, people also used to accept that. So this was a complex equation which was emerging in the later Vedic age.